Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus Mame review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Double Dragon, released in 1987 by Taito. This game was really a genre-defining title, which really set the stage for a lot of the upcoming beat-em-up games. In this game you take the parts of Billy and Jimmy Lee, and you have to save Marion, who is the girl who just got punched and kidnapped. Now, the car you see in the garage there is actually very similar to the Interceptor from a game called Road Blasters, which the guy who worked on this game also worked on as well. This game had a ton of ports as compared to any other game I've reviewed before. This game was basically put everywhere. In 1988, you had the Nintendo Famicom Nintendo Entertainment System release. In that same year, you had the Sega Master System release. Surprisingly enough, in 1989, they actually managed to port this game over to the Atari 2600, and then later that year they ported it to the 7800 as well. Then in 1989, there was the Game Boy version, followed up in 92 by the Sega Mega Drive or Sega Genesis version. In 1983, you got the Atari Lynx version. Then all the way in 2003, there is Double Dragon Advance for the Game Boy Advance, which is basically an enhanced version of this game, but put on the Game Boy Advance with some enhancements. Like, I believe you could also do like a hurricane kick in there where you couldn't do it here. Then, of course, just most recently in 2007, they released Double Dragon for Xbox Live Arcade. The only real enhancement it had was there was a high-definition mode which made the sprites look a lot smoother because they were actually physically enhanced instead of just smooth like a lot of games on XBLA. Now, as far as computer releases go, there's a full gamut of those as well. In 1988, you had the Commodore 64, Commodore Amiga, and MS-DOS 5 1/4 floppy disk versions. Then in 1989, you had the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, Amstrad CPC, and the Atari ST versions. Then, of course, in 1990, Commodore Amiga had the Amiga Champions package, which included this game. Commodore 64 had the 100% Dynamite package, which included this game as well. And that same package was ported to the ZX Spectrum. And of course, in 1989, Tiger Electronics released a one of those little handheld games that everybody likes so much that you could actually play the game with like limited graphics and like very beepy music if there's any at all. Okay, now here's the first boss. The thing that I liked about this is that you see that oil drum on the floor there that you can pick up. The cool part about it, as opposed to various other games I've played in the same genre, is that you pick up the barrel, you throw it at different enemies and stuff, but it doesn't disappear. It lands on the floor, and it just rolls and rests in place again, so you can actually go walk over and pick it up again. Now, a couple times in this video, you may notice some slowdown, but from what I've actually read, that's not caused by the emulator or the capture that I'm using on this emulator. This game actually did suffer quite a bit of slowdown because it was actually far and beyond anything they'd imagined this arcade hardware handle. You gotta realize, we're going all the way back to 1987. This is before you really even had standard arcade hardware for games like this is before anything like even the CPS-1 came out. This game, of course, just like many of the beat-em-up games, was a lot of fun if you had two players. And that's one thing I really thought was pretty cool about this game. The screen doesn't turn black and it doesn't go to the next stage, it just starts in the next stage. And you'll often have a couple guys fighting you. It won't ever really get all that bad. And one thing that's interesting is if you noticed on the actual title screen, the kanji were actually out of order. It should have been one order, but it was really the other order. Which did make sense, like, instead of being, what it turned out to be was the So Setsu Ryo. Thus, the title can be loosely translated to Twin Intercepting Dragons. Of course, this game wasn't the first beat 'em up on the arcade. A game from 1986 known as Renegade would take that credit. And if you look very carefully when I was fighting the first stage boss, which of course is past by now, there was actually a billboard that actually was for that game, Renegade, or in Japan it was, excuse my pronunciation if I'm horribly bad here, Neketsu Kunoi Kun, which of course, as I just mentioned, it's the Japanese version of Renegade. But this game does actually come in for the credits as being the first co-op beat-em-up game, which at the time was a rather unknown thing to really have. Of course, the versions of the game that were ported to other consoles were a bit different than this. The one that's most similar to this that I have seen is the Sega Mega Drive version, which I actually do own, which strangely enough, it comes in a cardboard box, which isn't like your normal clamshell Genesis case. You actually have to lift up the cardboard box and open it up, which is just kind of strange. And I honestly have no idea what killed those two enemies that just kind of like walked up to that box and then just fell over. It really makes no sense to me. And when I first heard this elevator sound, I was like, oh no, don't tell me the game's messing up or something. But yeah, that's just how that enemy comes, and that elevator sound is very disturbing and annoying. Now you're going to notice a little bit of the slowdown here, because there's 4 characters, including the player character on the screen at once. Which is just something about the arcade hardware. The game was just like... It's basically like the 1987 arcade equivalent of Crysis. The actual game was over-engineered, and it was made to do more than the actual hardware that it was made for could actually do. So you get slowdowns like this, and the only way to get past something like this was to play one of the eventual home versions. Which, as I said, the most loyal one at the time of this release still had to be the Sega Mega Drive Genesis version. That's one thing I found a little bit weird about this game. It feels kind of weird to be a dude just whipping people with those whips that those characters carry. And after coming off of the first boss, who was this really big dude, it's kind of weird to be fighting this guy who's the same size as you wearing this green outfit. But yeah, Double Dragon in its own right was a great game. It spawned tons of sequels. I believe there are actually 5 Double Dragon games, including Double Dragon 5, which was kind of a fighting game, I believe. I might look at that later on, but it also spawned a movie which most people hate, and it also spawned a fighting game based on that movie. But yeah, like games like Final Fight, and basically all beat-em-up games took cues from this game, because it was basically the stepping stone for all those games to start out. Even games like Ninja Turtles, which was released 2 years after this, might not have been as good if not for this genre-defining title. Well, this has been another Game Nexus Mame review, and I shall see you later. Definitely try this one out.